Every Thomas fan has a favorite character, or a lot more than just one. As for me, I'm no stranger to that either. Just like how I did my top 20 favorite Thomas episodes, I have considered about doing a favorite character list too, top 10 wise anyway. You may have seen that tier list before on both YouTube and Blue Sky posts, but over time a few of my favorites have been subject to change while the rest remain the same. Before we begin, I would like to clarify that this list is based entirely on my own opinion, so this isn't a top 10 best. So if there's a character on this list that I like but you don't, that's fine. And B, this list will feature characters only as seen in the television series, not in the books, magazines, or even All Engines Go, though they will be given a mention, minor spoilers. With all being said and done, here are my top 10 favorite characters from Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Number 10. Diesel 10. You'll probably not be surprised that I would include him on this spot, but for good reason, because 10 is my favorite number, so naturally it makes sense for Sodor's heavy metal monster himself. Anyway, Diesel 10, at least back when he was first created in Magic Railroad, is the perfect example of how to write a villain, especially for a kid's franchise, because in that movie, he often tries to act so mean, yet the engines don't take him seriously due to him being a nuisance they had to deal with. Sometimes they even laugh at his misfortunes, but when he gets really mad, he is no joke, and is one that no other engine would dare to step a wheel forward. From what we know, most of the material and dialogue was improvised by Neil Crone, who did a brilliant job capturing his evil character while also acting like a bumbling idiot on occasion. Also, whenever he, Splatter, and Dodge are on screen, I always compare their dynamic to that of Hacker, Buzz, and Delete from Cyber Chase. And fun fact, Linda Ballantyne also worked on said show as Wicked Witch, so you can imagine Christopher Lloyd using his hacker voice for Diesel 10. Wouldn't it be super hilarious or what? One funny story though was that as a kid, since I only saw Magic Road once and got scared before regaining my confidence and seeing it fully as I grew older, I often get confused as to why he was just called Diesel throughout the movie, and I was like, well, there's already an engine called Diesel, right? His actual name was only mentioned 2 times, but never all the time until Calling All Engines. I remember having that take-along model of the character and enjoyed playing with it so much, though I sadly lost it over time. It's hard to believe even after his debut, he left an interesting legacy in the fandom whenever we talk about Magic Railroad, and in terms of portrayal, I think both this movie and Series 17 worked well in their favors. The rest of his appearances, he was kinda neutered down because corporations nowadays don't take villains with open eyes, even though they should know that the scariness is what makes them brilliant in the first place. Overall, Diesel 10 is 10 out of 10 for devious deeds, brutal strength, and leaving a legacy that will never always be tarnished. Number 9. Donald and Douglas. And not too far behind are these two Caledonian Scots themselves. These two are my favorite twin characters in Thomas. I even learned about Scotland through them and their accents. I've talked deeply about them in my top 20 favorite episodes, but to put it in shorter words, Breakvan and the Deputation are my favorites about them. Their arc is so fascinating and interesting, especially Douglas, who is my favorite of the duo, who has been through quite a lot, from almost getting scrapped on the mainland to stowing away to Sodor with Donald. Even though they have gone into a few scrapes, they are still hardworking, take no nonsense from everyone, and are determined not to let every obstacle from stopping them. And since all the engines have gained a huge respect for them, they have returned the favor by firmly banding together to convince the Fat Controller to let them stay. Those two represent what dark times are like that none of the other Sodor characters knew about, and would carry over to when Douglas overcame his fear of scrap to rescue Oliver and Toad and escape. I know some people may prefer their blue livery to reflect their heritage like in the books, though I do think their black liveries are much more striking because it makes them feel like actual hardworking iron horses. Also, I think the Railway series is the best portrayal of them. The model series did well too, even though some people don't like Twin Trouble, though I do enjoy that episode. The CGI series really failed to understand the appeal of them and just labeled them as squabbling brothers than caring family members. Like, this trope works fine for Bill and Ben, and a few other characters from other shows like Liv and Maddie or Stan and Sandy from Hamtaro. Love Me Tender is what I consider an overrated episode in my opinion. Sorry guys, but I do see a lot of flaws in this episode, though at least the second act does make up for it. Despite their peaks and valleys, Donald and Douglas are still both the iconic characters in Thomas history and represent the value of family. Number 8. Spencer. Out of all the non-Audrey characters introduced in the show, Spencer is my definitive favorite of them all. Firstly, I want to talk about his technical basis for a second. He is based on the magnificent LNER streamlined A4 Pacifics, which are still to this day my favorite class of steam locomotives. In fact, a few members such as Mallard, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Sir Nigel Gresley are three of my favorites from this batch. Not only that, but the LNER is my favorite British railway company of the Big Four, so I have read a lot about the history of the A4s and Sir Nigel Gresley in general, which I am always fascinated with. Now for his character. Unlike most other newbies, Spencer is a standout in persona because he is the first steam engine villain, which in Hero of the Rails, it really shined him as a main character, and I always love how he was treated in CGI. Even in the formulaic era, for as bad as that one is. His rivalry with Gordon is always my favorite in terms of character dynamics, and it makes sense for these two cousins going by history-wise and speed. His classic series theme, which was inspired by the Coronation Scot, which is also a streamliner, really reflects his arrogant and snooty persona perfectly. While it would be true that Wilbert Audrey may not like the current show like he did with Series 3, but I think he definitely loved the idea of Spencer. And he could have easily appeared in the Railway series earlier, let alone Mallard, but that was in Christopher Audrey's books. Overall, what else is there to say? Brilliant design, great character, Spencer is one that I can really enjoy on screen. Number 7. Thomas and Percy. This is kind of a tie for both main characters, but I think it's okay. I know Thomas and Percy are two of the most favorites of every fan when they first watched the series as a kid. Though for me, I wasn't always interested in the two when I was younger, possibly because I love bigger characters. But over time, I have grown to loving both of them, and they really have several of the best episodes, at least in the earlier seasons, which is what I want to talk about. The reason why I prefer their classic series personas is because how each of them grow throughout the evolution of the first 5 series. Both have their flaws, often have their petty squabbles, and are often cheeky that leads them into trouble like all of us do back then. But over time they each grow throughout the many scrapes and situations up to the point where they suddenly mature, yet still have the same old selves on occasion. The only difference between them are that Thomas was cocky and impatient, whose carelessness often leads to trouble, but has cooled down and opens up to become wiser, while Percy represents childhood innocence as a naive little scamp, up to a point where after being looked down upon by anyone, he learns to stand his own ground and be brave. Not to say that the later model and CGI seasons didn't do a good job with them, but depending on the different writers and eras, they do tend to flip-flap. And that's something that the Unlucky Tug made fairly clear in Sodor's Finest about Thomas, that the show is not a self-contained story with an end point. Not like something that you see in K-On! Where it's only 2 seasons with a story that concludes on a high note. And as a growing television series that's made to continue, the more limited you get with your main title character at a point that can be difficult to stop writing for, and as they say, a title character with flaws make a great character. And don't get me wrong, even those later seasons have great episodes too about Thomas and Percy, only depends on the era you're watching. Overall, those two sure have one big roller coaster journey throughout the course of the original show, but it doesn't mean that they are still the most loved and talked about characters that all of us can relate and be inspired from. You know what they say, little engines can do big things. Number 6. Edward. Yep, the first character created by Wilbert Awdry and one that is also every fan's favorite character. When I was a kid, though, even I wasn't interested in Edward as a character because I was more interested in the other engines getting into crazy antics. But with time, as I grew older and learning his backstory, especially the series creation, I slowly learned to appreciate the wise old blue engine. I originally had him as number 4, but decided to put him at number 6. Like, he may not appear or stand out in appearance of the main fleet of engines, but his story is what makes him essential and should not go unnoticed, especially in stories like Old Iron and Edward's Exploit, which shows how and why Edward is so important to the Northwestern Railway and the Fat Controller. He is Sodor's old sage, and is so worldly because of his experience. Even through dark times, he'll always pull through to the end. Like most others, including the unlucky Tug, I much prefer him in the Railway series books and as a supporting character in series 3 to 5, because even after his character arc in the first 2 series was completed, there isn't really any need to keep giving him more episodes. It's not to say the crew shouldn't, and he does have some great non-Awdry ones like Edward the Great, PA Problems, Hunt the Truck, and his supporting role in James the Second Best to add to that. However, it should be noted that when writing too many Edward episodes where he has a flaw that damages his character, then it becomes his big downfall, where he either acts like a Neon James or feeling feeble and looked down by the bigger engines, which is what the later seasons of the model era, and especially the CGI series on occasions, kinda went down that route, even though he did seem like his old true self, but still. I can see why in A Shed for Edward they had to write him off the main cast, which I'm very okay with, and it is natural for him to move to Wellsworth since it is the starting point of his branch line. Kinda wish they compromised it a little bit more with script editing and planning. And this is also why in Great Sodor Engines I gave Edward one spotlight episode as the sole main lead in Season 1 to make him stay consistent to his true personality. Despite not showing up as much and not nearly every generation knows who he is, but Edward still surprises us all in many different ways just like the other engines, and will always be respected in high regards as one of Sodor's finest engines. Number 5. Salty. Like Spencer, Salty is another favorite non-Awdry character of mine, and also my favorite Diesel character, while Diesel 10 comes in second place. Most nearly everyone and their grandma fondly knows him, especially because his introductory debut episode was the mascot of a certain VHS and DVD when Series 6 came to the US. He is such a fun, jovial character that while he talks like a pirate, but he still knows how to get a job done, and never tires of telling anyone his sea stories. I've actually read in one railway magazine that his real bassist, the BR Class 07s, worked at Southampton Docks, so this makes his character even more accurate than just the technical history itself. What I love most about him is that while he is one of the few engines that knows how to handle troublesome trucks with respect and kindness, but from the different likes of Edward, Stepney, and Hero, he calms them down with a sea shanty that helps work faster. I also love how despite feeling depressed about not being by the sea, he still knows that a job is a top priority. Like Spencer, I can see him fit into the Railway series lore, mostly for Tidmouth Harbor, and maybe you can fit Cranky somewhere along there too. Speaking of which, their dynamic in the show is so humorous to watch. They're like the Mr. Krabs and Squidward of Sodor. While he was excluded from numerous episodes of the hit model era in terms of deleted scenes, he does still pop up in some at least, and like a few of the secondaries that got shafted, he is still in character. I love how stern he was in James Goes Too Far, telling the story about the clues in Thomas and the Treasure despite it being a bad episode and all. And I will always champion this moment in Season 8's Fish, where instead of being crossed with Thomas, he shrugs the accident off, delighted to be surrounded by fish. The CGI series did a lot more with Salty, which is something to be admired, even though I think there can be one of the few times and instances where he can be a little out of character, I think. But still, Salty is a character that can tell a tale or two that we can always follow. Number 4. Peter Sam. I originally had him at number 6, but I swapped him and Edward to different spots. Anyhow, if you were to ask me what my favorite Skarloey engine is, then Peter Sam is definitely your answer. Even he is a fan favorite among many users too, aside from Duke, Skarloey, Duncan, etc. Thomas Theorist had done a great analysis video about him, so it's kinda hard to describe him in my own words without copying what he said, but I'll try as best as I could, even in short terms. Peter Sam is kind of a culmination between Percy and Henry. Percy as in being naive and cheeky, especially to his elders like Duke in his younger days, but like Henry because he has also been through a lot, such as getting his old funnel damaged in trucks to getting a new one in special funnel. It's like the narrow gauge equivalent of the Flying Kipper, right? He also has many of the greatest episodes out of all the Skarloey engines aside from the previous two I just mentioned, but others like You Can't Win, Peter Sam and the Refreshment Lady, The Magic Lamp, and my favorite, The Refreshment Lady's Tea Shop, which again I've also gone over in my favorite episodes video. Also, his real-life basis, Edward Thomas from the Tally-Lynn Railway, is one of the most iconic narrow-gauge engines in railway history. Speaking of which, while the original model is charming, but this is one of the few times where I prefer the CGI render over the prop because of how accurate he looks, including his funnel, and I love the voice that Stephen Keenman provided. I could go on and on more about Peter Sam, but other than that, he is just one charming little engine with a heart of gold. Number 3. Toby. Yep, the chaotic wise old grandpa himself. And like Thomas and Percy among others, Toby is a fan favorite not just by us, but also several of the original cast and crew members, including Christopher Audrey, Davey Moore, etc. What makes Toby stand out more than Edward is that while the latter is also old and wise, but is also firm and tries to talk sense into others, the former, while sharing that same characteristic, is more content with his life and laughs at the ignorant youngsters who hadn't learned their lesson. See Dirty Objects, Thomas, Percy and the Coal, Bullseyes, The Lost Puff, etc. He has some of the greatest moments and stories in the Railway series and Classic series too, the latter of which he has a lot more spotlight episodes than Edward. And the main difference is while Edward is kind of a supporting character who shows up every now and then, Toby is one of those main characters who is put through some of the craziest situations, yet he still maintains his persona and conquers them. But there's also a few episodes where he is paired up with the humans whom he has a very special connection with. I also love how he is the neutral type to Thomas and Percy squabbling, knowing that they don't know any better, and just sits on the side with glee, like an old man eating popcorn in delight. The class of engine he is based on, the LNER J70 steam trams, are very unique and most singular engines that there is a lot of history you can learn from him when reading about the characters, of course. It's a shame though, in the Hit and Mattel eras he has become a wet blanket and warrior, and sadly he is not even a main character anymore, despite that he was forced into the main Steam Team concept. Heck, even in some of the later movies he starred in didn't do that much with him, with the exception of Blue Mountain Mystery when he was given something to do, and even in Thomas and the Magic Railroad admittedly is the only ever time where he really shined as a main character in his biggest scene that everyone talks highly about. Also, I love Colm Feore's performance as him. Despite all that, oldies but goldies, the world is much nicer whenever we see Toby, an engine we can all learn and care from. Number 2. Henry. There's no denying that whenever you are tasked of guessing who the first Thomas characters are, Henry is one of them that comes to mind, and for good reason. While design-wise he has had the most troubling history between creator and artist in the Railway series, but what's never tarnished is his character arc, especially in the earlier stories. He was originally a failed engine with a lot of flaws that prohibited him from pulling heavy trains properly, and does get into a few incidental moments with tunnels, going on strike, etc. But then from getting special Welsh coal to getting a rebuild that made him bigger and stronger, he's a very relatable character, like someone having a disability that often puts them down and are often dismissed by others, but they still pick themselves up and show them a thing or two. It's the same thing with Henry. When life shoves you down the worst way possible, there is always a way to get back on track. Even I often feel the pressure of that feeling on occasion too. And it's not just that, but he is a main character with a ton of episodes, such as the Series 1 episodes, Henry's Forest, Henry's Hero, Something in the Air, Haunted Henry, etc. Even in the books, he also has some badass moments as evident in Super Rescue. While he isn't the most consistent character in later seasons, is he still one of the greatest characters? You can bet your own smokebox he is. I mostly prefer the model series version of Henry, for while he may be a little grumpy, but he is still a gentle giant, with an appreciation for nature and the world around him in the non-Audrey stories, which I think really adds a lot of layers to his character that separates him from the likes of Gordon and James. Like many others, I am also sad and frustrated to know he isn't a main character in the Bwubba era given the higher-ups of Mattel and company, but no matter what life brings, Henry will always give any engine or somebody a run for their money through strength, determination, and willpower. We couldn't have found another enterprising engine like him. Before we get to number 1, let me briefly go over some honorable mentions that almost made the list. Rebecca. Yes, I am aware she is not a character that's worth anyone else's time, and I'll admit she could have been reworked a little bit more properly and sincerely, but for me, she is both my favorite CGI and female character. I originally had her in the number 3 spot, but has since been pushed forward down the line. I love the Bullet Light Pacifics, mostly the unrebuilt variations, and considering the time period, it does reflect her young personality. Only wish she was given more than just 1 or 2 episodes per season. Duck. Yep, everyone's fan favorite Great Western Pannier tank engine, and one that everyone talks about when they think about the original returnee characters, especially since the Renaissance era. For me, I love Duck, and he is the embodiment of quality in Thomas, and after looking at the hit and formulaic eras, thank God he was never featured at all. He was almost close to making this list, though not nearly, but still a great character. Cranky. Everyone and their grandma also remembers the first TV series only character, given the fact his debut episode got a VHS and DVD release when talking about season 5. But to put it in short, Cranky is both funny and relatable on a regular basis. I've stated before and I'll say it again, he is the equivalent of Roberto Arvelo from Hamtaro. Temperamental, insecure, and sometimes, well, cranky by name and rude nature, but he has a heart of gold under all that gruff and makes friends with unlikely species such as seagulls. I already feel like a broken record though, aren't I? Hero. Like Rebecca, he's another favorite CGI character of mine. While his backstory in terms of technical details may have retconned Sodor's history, his personality is something to never take away from. Even through the formulaic era, he is such a delight to charm his way through a boring plot. The Renaissance era did a lot more with him too, in Series 17 at least. Definitely a character the young audience can relate from. James. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love James, though I do prefer him in the model era, The Railway series, while he isn't bad, I think he was treated as the engine always rude and getting his comeuppance. And the CGI series, while still he maintained his boastful personality, is kinda dialed up to 100 most of the time. He is the pop of red to brighten up anyone's day, even against the snow. A tad bit conceited and really quite vain, but we know we love him just the same. As such, he is also just a mere close to making the top spot. And speaking of which, for my number one favorite Thomas character, the suspense is killing me. Get ready because he is Gordon. Yeah, it's obvious that you know what my pick would be, but yeah, I'm a big sucker for Gordon. He was my all-time favorite Thomas character since I was a kid watching the show, and I still do to this day. Main reason why is because not only do I love big engines, and most of my train-related VHS and DVDs are tender engines as well, but I also love the fact that he is a fast steam engine. Not to mention, whenever he is on screen, he is always such a delight to watch him go by. As I grew older, there are more things detail-wise of why he's so cool, because his real brother, Flying Scotsman, is my favorite steam locomotive. Though again, he is the most famous steam engine in the world by many, so looking at his design really looks Gordon-esque, and I have read a lot about the history of the engine, and again, the LNER itself, as I've stated before with Spencer. Character-wise, Gordon does have the greatest character arc in the Railway series, from which he grows from an arrogant, pompous dick to a humble, respectable, and fatherly figure. Even the model series struck gold between a mix of pompous and good-hearted. You got the pompous episodes like Off the Rails, Famous Visitor, and A Better View for Gordon, but you also have some good-hearted ones like Down the Mine, Paint Pots and Queens, Gordon and Spencer, and the Hit era, to which Gordon is the most consistent in each season of them. CGI-wise, only the formulaic seasons is where Gordon is treated equally, cause Sharon Miller, when she was head writer, stated that Gordon is one of her favorites, which really shows. The remaining seasons, however, didn't do him justice, being stuck to this one grumpy note stick flanderization with a few bright spots on occasion. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing Grumpy Gordon, but only when it's genuine and funny in a more dignified way, and not as a Squidward punching gag. And I don't usually praise All Engines Go because that reboot is so unwatchable to sit through, but at least it did portray Gordon well, especially because Neil Crone, who voiced him in Magic Railroad, reprised his role on said reboot. And he is my favorite Gordon voice actor evolution-wise. Yeah, totally bizarre and crazy how I mentioned that said reboot here, right? Right? What Gordon represents, though, is the embodiment of value and life. With elements high and low, when it starts and ends, it's a journey by rail that no one forgets with flaws along the way. So to end on a high note, this is why Gordon is and always be my favorite engine of Thomas the Tank Engine in my heart and mind whenever I think of any of the characters on the island of Sodor. And that's it. Thankfully this list is much more short and concise. Sort of, if you count the stuttering a bit. And also, this list is made in honor of the bicentennial celebrations of railway travel since the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway in the United Kingdom. So happy 200 years to this auspicious railway occasion. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!